be seen, then please just turn your camera off. Lovely, thank you. Okay, thank you so much for joining us here today. My name is Jade Hamnet, and I'm the chair, sorry, already mumbling my words, of ILG Community. Just a reminder, this event will be recorded and will go on our website in a couple of weeks. We have had more people booked to attend this event than any other we've held. This is both exciting because the word is getting out there, and concerning because it implies just how many people are struggling with our topic for this event. Before we launch into that, I just want to give a brief update into what's been going on at ILG Community. Our Facebook page is creeping towards 500 members. We were welcomed as a member onto the Skills for Care PA framework group this month. We gave a talk to a large group of NHS and council staff in Kent, which was set up to help understand the role of the PA, and this talk received excellent feedback. We also continue to attend events with the Department of Health and Social Care, and we'll be shortly having one on the care certificate and how the role of the PA fits or doesn't fit into it. The subject for today, financial assessments and disability-related expenses, is one I care deeply about and have personally championed for years. Whilst it sounds not very exciting on the surface, the impact it has on those drawing on care is massive. Firstly, I want to acknowledge the hidden group of people that don't show in statistics and don't get spoken about often, which is the group that have been unable to afford care contributions in the first place. They are left to suffer on as best they can. Then there is the second group also struggling massively, those who have care but are finding it incredibly difficult to afford it. There is an important term to understand, at least for those using care in England, the minimum income guarantee, also known as the MIG. And this is a figure which the government says is the minimum amount you should be left to live on after most housing costs are taken off. And I can't just tell you the MIG easily, because as with everything, it depends on your age, your circumstances, what benefits you receive, and so on. But this MIG has generally stayed at a very similar rate for years, although it was recently decided to change with inflation, which should have been obvious to begin with. So when carrying out a financial assessment in England, the basics are the council should look at income, certain outgoings, and leave with the MIG. Anything left over this minimum income is fair game, at least in their eyes. But this is when the disability-related expenses should come in, also known as DRE. A lot of acronyms going on today, I'm afraid. The cost of being disabled, when you really drill down into the figures, is astronomical. There are probably so many things that we buy that we don't even think about relates to our health. And the idea is the council should take those off the amount we have to pay. That's the theory anyway. When I first had my direct payment many years ago, I had someone from the financial department at my county council come to my home with a list of potential DRE, and he went through every item on that list. He highlighted items that didn't really occur to me, but clearly were related to my disability. I had to show evidence, but the process was helpful and transparent. Then about 5 years ago, the council changed their policy on DRE. They didn't tell us what their new policy was, just that it had changed. Then began the guessing game. Does this still count as DRE? No. Why not? It's not on the list. Can I see the list? No. Not very helpful. Suddenly, anything they deemed a health need was not deemed a DRE, and I was told multiple times the NHS should be covering health needs. I explained they didn't and wouldn't, but it didn't matter. Suddenly my life and everything I spent on DRE was being divided into health or social care. To me, it made absolutely no sense because our lives just don't divide neatly that way. For example, something like a wheelchair might outwardly be seen as a health need, but without it, I can't leave the house or see my friends and family. So to me, it's both a health and social care need. Plus, to me, it's just something I need. It's not something that needs to be categorised, always in their favour, funnily enough. So I even put in a freedom of information request to try and find their DRE policy, but the person answering didn't even understand the terms I was using or claimed not to, and kept sending me everything but what I wanted. I was finally told there was no policy and there was no guide, but this didn't make any sense to me, because how can there be any consistency or transparency if the council don't have any guidelines anywhere? Then, to add insult to injury, last year the government announced they were increasing benefits by 10% to help meet the inflationary costs, but particularly to help towards the cost of living crisis. In response, many councils met to discuss this increase and whether it was actually fair to take it. Some increased the minimum income guarantee to help those paying for care. Some councils didn't even think about it and just took the increase. Those paying for care are being doubly punished. That they have to pay for care in the first place, something no one actively chooses, and then they are losing the benefit increase given by government to help in a specific circumstance of rising costs. And we are left with an unfair and untenable situation on both counts. And we also want to remind everyone there are alternatives to this. It's really important to keep in mind that charging by councils is a choice, and some are waking up to the alternatives. Recently, Hammersmith and Fulham Council and Tower Hamlets both decided to stop charging for care. In Scotland in 2019, they brought in Frank's Law, which was supposed to provide those with age under 65 with free personal care. The Scottish Government gave 30 million to cover this, but this policy hasn't gone quite as intended. Councils have taken the term personal care literally and have now pulled out anything in a care plan that doesn't fall under this as chargeable. For example, home help, supporting the community, and so on. They've also increased costs elsewhere, such as for aids and adaptations. We all need to demand better from our respective governments. If they won't go down the route of free care, they need to relook at their policies. They need to carefully word laws so that loopholes can't be found like they have in Scotland. They need to make sure that DRE guides are fair, transparent, and reflect the reality of the cost of being disabled. They need to relook at the minimum income guarantee, which particularly hits benefit recipients the hardest. Why should those needing to have care live on a lower amount than the rest of society? Benefits are already set lower than the costs of being disabled, and those needing care are being hit the hardest of all. So how do we fight back? First of all, we use the tools already given in the form of putting in formal complaint relating to the contribution increase, stating that they have not taken into account the rising cost of everything, and they need to relook at your DRE as well. Secondly, we need to arm ourselves with information. Jon Abrams is here from Inclusion London to talk about the topic, and their chatbot to help assist with disability-related expenses. We also have a brilliant panel today, including Ellen Kennedy from Real, a group who are instrumental in getting care charges scrapped in Tower Hamlets. Also on the panel is Vici Richardson, CEO of Disability North, and direct payment recipients Don O'Neal and Brett Bignall. We were also supposed to be joined today by Iggy Patel today, a name many of you will know in conjunction with DRE, and all the information he provides on the subject. Unfortunately, he's unwell, but has kindly offered to answer DRE inquiries by email. Thirdly, we need to support campaigns going on, such as by Don O'Neal, who will be talking to us later, about the National Association of Financial Assessment Officers guide that many councils around the country use to guide them on DRE. The group that creates this guide is an unelected and unaccountable body. The figures in this guide seem to bear no relation to reality and have had no input from those with lived experience. Don will be telling us how we can help him with his legal campaign targeting this guide. Another campaign for those in Scotland to follow is Scotland Against the Care Tax, and they can be found on Facebook. And fourth and finally, we all need to shout about this topic. If you have ideas, put them forward in the chat. We really hope you get a lot out of today, and I'm now going to pass across to the panel. We have some questions already submitted, which we're going to start with, but please do pop any questions you have in the chat. And just before we go to the panel, we're going to go to Brett, who is going to very kindly give us a brief overview of the charging systems in each country. Obviously, I briefly mentioned Scotland before. That was just in relation to where they've made some changes, not their overall system. And I do realise they don't charge for any age. I was just talking about the recent changes that they've made. So Brett is now going to cover a very brief overview of the different charging systems. So we'll pass to Brett.
Okay, let's start with Northern Ireland. In Northern Ireland, you don't get charged for receiving care of any kind, although from what I understand from the assessment criteria, then it's not as wonderful as it sounds. Going up north to Scotland, it's a bit of a postcode lottery, but as already alluded to, then personal care is supposed to be free at the point of delivery, which is fine, but other services are then charged for, so it doesn't really help the disabled person at the end of the day. England have the worst charging policy in my view. Basically, there's no upper limit to what they can charge, so there's no ceiling. So if your care package is £700 a week and they deem that you've got that amount of income, then they can charge you that rate. Of course, they're supposed to take disability related expenditure into account, but as Jade has already alluded to, it's a bit of a postcode lottery in that respect. And finally, Wales. The situation in Wales is very similar to England, except for the fact that the savings threshold is 24,000 instead of 23,250, and the maximum you can be charged per week is £100, regardless of the amount of your savings or indeed the size of your care package, which realistically rewards millionaires. So that's not an ideal situation either. And that's just a brief overview in terms of the four nations as they refer to us. Back to Jade, I think.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry, I don't think Spotlight was working there as a technical issue. Can we try and get it on now, please, if anyone can sort it out? Okay.
Jade, sorry, Spotlight is on, but I think, Brett, we couldn't quite see your mouth as you were talking there for a second, sorry, but it did take me a while to get that on, but I'm going to now put the panel on, Jade, as well, okay?
Sorry, the camera moved when I was talking.
Okay, we are now going to pass across to the panel. So we have got with us Brett Bignall, we've got Vicky from Disability North, we've got Don O'Neal, and we have got Jon from Inclusion London and Ellen from Real. So we're hopefully just going to give a second to spotlight those if that's possible, and then we will start asking questions. So please do get your questions in the chat now. Anything on financial assessments, DRE, etc. And then it's how can everyone else just see the
Bear with me just a second, Jade. I'm just gonna pop the poll up, shall I? And then we'll get this sorted. It won't take a second.
So as you can see, we've got a poll going up today. It's the first time we've used a poll, so we're just going to see how it goes. But feel free to be answering that whilst we're sorting out the panel, and then. Okay, brilliant. So the first question we've got is to Ellen, throwing it straight to you here. What are your tips and ideas for getting your local council to consider free care?
Very good question. So we, some of the things have already been mentioned in the chat, such as writing to MPs and that sort of thing. Our success for campaigning largely came from doing lots of co-production work, so collecting as much evidence as possible as to the negative impact that care charging has on disabled people in particular. we as an organisation formed some really strong strategic links with some senior members of the council and of public health, which really helped us to sort of push those buttons and pull on those strings, really. Challenging councils to look to other models. So Hammersmith and Fulham were one of the first boroughs, as you've already mentioned, Jade. So we did a lot of encouraging Tower Hamlets to look over at the Hammersmith and Fulham model, really shining a spotlight on some of those examples. And then finally, I would say, if you are a member of an organisation, or a staff member of an organisation, encouraging those organisations to talk to other disabled people organisations and team up. A united front is always more successful. And obviously we work on quite a local level, and that seems to be the way to get change to happen, is to focus on that local level of change rather than the national level of change.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much. Lucy, sorry, we've got next question here. Sorry, mumbling. And this is to Brett, please. My council has refused any DRE for cleaning costs and won't let it go in my budget either. My condition means I can't do it myself, so I need help. How do I get it covered as a DRE?
Okay, the first thing I would do is launch a formal complaint against the local authority, and make sure that you put within in that letter that it is a formal complaint. Let's start with some basic principles. Local authorities do not like formal complaints. Okay, they get monitored by them as far as the social services groups are concerned, and also by the local council and how that runs. So first of all, put the formal complaint in, and as we said earlier, write to your MPs and councillors, etc. Again, they don't like these issues raising their ugly head, as it were. They like to just charge disabled people under the radar and not allow the DRE to maximise their income. So yeah, just raise them first of all through the complaints process, and if you're not satisfied with the council's response at stage 1, escalate it. Keep it going all the way through the stages, and ultimately the ombudsman, which is nothing to do with social services at all, the ombudsman will then make the decision as to what the council has done and whether that's lawful. Trust me when I tell you, there was a case involving East Sussex County Council recently, where DRE was highlighted, and the fact that the local authority were not taking disability-related expenditure into account. The ombudsman ruled it was unlawful, and the council had to pay the disabled person back £1,200. Okay, I realise it's hassle putting in complaints, but really, you are in control here. Make the council do what they should do and hold them to account. Social workers and financial assessment people are not your friend, okay? They are there to do a job. They are there to assess your need and to assess your disability-related expenditure and your ability, as they see it, to pay. But when it comes down to it, also be lobbying your MPs and councillors to abolish charging. The more noise we make, people, the more they have to listen. All right.
Brilliant, thank you. Right, anyone on the panel who wants to take this one? I'm being told that I should do internet shopping instead of visiting shops, but I have to spend at least £40 and pay for delivery when I want to look at reduced items and veg boxes when in the shop. Would anyone like to answer that one? Just wave. Or John?
Yeah, I can answer that. Thank
Brilliant.
you for inviting me today. A real pleasure to be here. I've got years of experience of social care charging, and we've developed a bot, and you can definitely claim for that as DRE. And in part of the session that I'm running later, and I have put some links in the chat, we produced an online guide and a digital chatbot that will help you complete your form. But you can, in effect, really claim for anything. The list, I started doing a list, but it can be endless. As long as you can put a disability-related reason, you can put in a claim. So, for example, someone put in a claim for a small fish tank. They suffer from anxiety and depression, and the fish in the fish tank relieves and soothes them and reduces levels of stress. So by explaining I bought that to reduce my levels of stress, you can, for example, claim for pets if they reduce your social isolation or your anxiety or give you structure. But the key thing is you always have to give a reason. So you couldn't just say, well, I want a fish tank or I want a dog, but you've got to give the reason. The dog relieves or my symptoms of anxiety. Or, for example, hobbies and leisure activities. I go to Costa, I'm socially isolated, and once a week it's where I meet people and have a coffee. It reduces my social isolation, my feelings of depression, and then you can claim for that, for the coffee and the trip. So the list is really endless. But as a colleague just mentioned before, either counsellors have these blanket policies or they don't understand what DRE is. So often they may just be looking at this list and may not realise it's a lot more flexible than it is.
So Jay, can I just add a quick thing? Yeah, so if you're looking for arguments against what the council says, I've just put in the chat some ombudsman cases, and in there it gives you the outline of what the ombudsman thought. So you might find that your case is similar to the ombudsman case. If you look at those cases, the ruling will explain why they rule a certain way, and it can maybe help you put an argument towards the local authority, especially if you're bringing a formal complaint.
Thank you. And Ellen, have you got something to add on this one?
Yes, thank you. So we have also had some success. We've been using a tool called the Personal Outcome Scale, which measures quality of life for people. And we've used this quite successfully to evidence where similar decisions have been made. So the example that we used it in was more around people who were being pushed to have this at like Wiltshire Farms or the equivalent of Meals on Wheels, and they argued that that was, impacting on their social isolation, which it was, and we evidenced that although financially it maybe was having a positive impact, negative impacts were happening on their social inclusion and their health and well-being. So there are some evidence-based tools out there that feel free to get in touch with us if you want to know more about, that we can support with as well.
Fantastic, thank you. Vicky, I was hoping you'd go cover the next one if possible. Is it still the case that if you work and don't claim benefits, you don't pay a contribution?
Your working income isn't counted towards your financial income for the financial assessment.
But your savings threshold would, because there's been a question about that on the chat as well, this £23,000 figure. And my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is it's from 14 to 20, I'm not giving the exact amounts here, is where they look at it, isn't it? Do you see what I mean? So it starts at 14, and then from there you pay a certain amount up until around the 23 threshold. So someone said their council's different, but I think that's roughly the same for everyone in England, but slightly different for Wales and the other countries.
The situation in Wales is that basically if you're earning money, that can't be taken into account, but again the savings threshold is £24,000. And it's worth noting that I've lived back in Wales for 7 years, and that 24,000 limit hasn't changed at all in that time. So obviously what you have here is what they technically call fiscal drag, where basically your income goes up and the savings threshold effectively goes down because it's stayed the same, if that makes sense, i.e. inflation's gone up, so therefore the savings threshold by which you end up paying the full charge of £100 is still the same. And I believe that the situation is still the same in England, 23,250, and it has been for several years.
Fantastic, thank you. John, would you like to add to that?
It was just to go back to the template letters. On one of the links I posted, we've now put together template letters that you can download, and one of them will be about the receipts quoting that case. You just need to add your name and send it in, but I'll go over that more during the session. So we've done one for receipts, one if a council's inflexible about their list of DRE, and one if council isn't responding. We hope to develop a lot more over the coming months.
Brilliant, thank you. Right, I'm going to go on to the chat now, so we've got some time to get through as many of those as possible. First of all, Lucy says, unfortunately, we can't all move to Scotland. That is very true. I mean, I think Agnes would argue everything wasn't perfect there, but it certainly does seem slightly better than perhaps the rest of the UK. Right, the next question. Is there not an upper ceiling if your care reaches 86,000 approximately? This is from Jenny. Do you want to explain that one, Jenny? Or do you mean in your life? Oh, I know you're talking about
I was reading that there's a threshold basically where that if you have had so much spent on you that you then don't get charged. And I thought it was roughly about 86,000, but I'm not absolutely sure where I read it.
I'll come in there if you want. Basically, the current government were looking at charging and how disabled people were going to be charged and putting a ceiling on that. Unfortunately, it's been delayed and kicked down the road as usual as far as charging is concerned, and that hasn't actually come in yet. Yeah. And there's no timescale for that happening either.
I think that's why no one knows anything about it, because they haven't really decided themselves yet, as Brett has just said. So yeah.
I'm just ahead of myself, that's all.
Camilla asks, do needs need to be formally acknowledged in the care plan for it to be regarded as a DRE? Does anyone? Don, would you like to take this one?
No, they don't have to be formally recognised in the care plan. I mean, I think if you could just show that it's real, that's fine. I think also, if they say it has to be shown in the care plan, well, update the care plan, really. I mean, that's no real excuse. And the care plan doesn't always capture everything, but
agreed.
Essentially, it's about you and your personal life. That the Care Act is very big on looking at you, and it does state that the service user knows their needs best. And so if the care plan, it doesn't say well what you want, just get it updated and say, look, I know me best. So it's fine.
Brilliant, thank you. So Lucy's asked about the savings threshold. So again, that was me probably not explaining that very well. The 23,000 is the upper amount. The 14,000 is the lower amount that you mentioned. So from 14 is when you start contributing up until it gets to 23, when it's full, you're fully having to pay for it. Jenny asks, I'm challenging DRE as they put it up again when they did my benefits. So in fact, it's slightly less. Also not transparent. Sorry, I didn't read that.
Yeah, I'm a bit dyslexic. It's not the right word, maybe a lot dyslexic. Yeah, they put it up. I'm on benefits. I started working last year on work with the council, doing panels and tenders for adult social care. That's all I'm saying. I'm under a ND, whatever they're called, because I thought I'd be more active and try and actually input into who they're actually going to tender to and what questions we need to ask them. But the hardest thing about East Sussex is there is no transparency when it comes to the financial assessment. We don't ever get a breakdown. The social workers never see it, so they can't tell you. I had a social worker last year, and all I've got is a letter taking it up, and it actually means that I will be worse off than the increase they gave me on the benefits. And that the situation with me working is proving very problematic because I work for 3 different organisations, and I'm not sure how the because it makes me feel better if in any way that could be included, some of it in my DRE. I'm going to try to do the DRE. I'm going to try and find someone to help me do it, but I do really want to challenge that, because there's a lot of my money is going now. They're not supposed to take in the PIP stuff, but they do.
Okay, just to pick up on that point, when they do a financial assessment, if they haven't provided you with a written breakdown of how they've carried out the assessment, again, put in a formal complaint. East Sussex County Council, having worked for them for or worked with indirect payments for 16 years down there, this was commonplace. Just put a formal complaint in saying, I'm legally entitled to a written breakdown of how you carried out the assessment in order to be able to challenge it.
Also, in the Care Act itself, it does say that they're meant to provide information that is accessible to you. So if you just say to them that I don't understand this, please provide it in a way that is accessible to me, and they have to do that.
Hello, can I say something?
Yeah.
Hi. My husband's an accountant, and he looked at their recent increase demand, and we noticed that they were demanding, because it had gone up 10% for all our income, they then increased their prices, or they're charging by 10%. But what they didn't do was increase all our offsets by 10%, which would have cancelled it out, because you have to remember that anything that you offset against it has to also go up by 10%. So if they don't do that and you don't argue it, if you write back to them and say, but you haven't included a 10% increase on the things that we have agreed, like the cost of wet wipes or whatever it is that they agree with you, that has also gone up 10%. So you might find, as long as you talk to them about it, but they didn't include that. It's a clever ploy. It's almost like one of those financial scandals that in times to come, they'll say, we made a mistake. But you've also got to tell them that that your increases have also, your offsets have also gone up 10%. So, they shouldn't get all of the 10% back from you because your income went up by that. Everything else has gone up by 10%.
Yeah, that's a really, really excellent point. And that's something we all need to be challenging. And I say that knowing I also got the increase letter in April and I haven't done anything about it. It's very easy to say, but when you've got a million other battles going on, it can be really difficult. But it is on my list, and we all need to put it on our list. If we got that similar letter, we need to be challenging it. Right, another one from Anna. We receive a PA allowance for my partner, who is a double lower leg amputee, so we do get financial assistance, but asked if they also have an increase in hourly pay, so as the carers are all increasing their hourly rate, but there's been no increase from the allowance. So I assume you're talking about the wages, is that right, Anna? That they haven't increased your budget to cover the extra cost. Would anyone like to take this one?
I'm happy to. Most local authorities increase their rates in April, but believe you me, some do it much later. If you feel that the direct payments rate isn't sufficient to meet that need, then that's a legal requirement by local authorities. They have to set the direct payments rate at a sufficiently high level in order to meet that service. So again, you can challenge them.
I have actually emailed them 3 times so far and asked them sort of when they're planning on increasing it, and I've had no response whatsoever. Okay, so use the formal complaints process, because sometimes when you email, they think you're just having a grumble. There's a difference between somebody having a moan or a grumble or whatever, because they're a bit
peeved by a situation and somebody actually making it informal and then escalating it right the way up to the ombudsman level.
Right, okay, thank you.
Okay, the next question is, if we wait for the questions, I'm just going to get through the chat first because we've got limited time, and when we finish the chat I will open it to, sorry, I don't know why that's doing that. Can everyone mute who's not speaking, because it seems to be sending my voice around many times and once is enough for everyone. Right, Philip says, one relatively new issue relating to DRE is the cost of battery backup systems for medical equipment used in a person's home. Although the equipment belongs to the NHS and is for medical needs, the only way I've managed to buy one is using my social services personal budget. How can we force the NHS to pay for these costs of their equipment? If the energy network providers are requiring this expenditure on the part of disabled people, then arrangements need to be put in place for the cost to be met by the owner of the equipment, not by their users. Would anyone like to take this one?
That's quite an individual case. I've not heard of that before. I suppose first and foremost, write to the council and explain the situation and explain the cost and just ask them to pay for it. And again, if you are paying charges, maybe put it in as DRE and claim it back really. But I think maybe first of all, ask the council to try and pay for it.
Can I just come in there?
Yeah, of course.
I did, as I said in the chat there, the council did agree to pay for it, but only because I had surplus in my direct payments account because it hadn't been spent during the pandemic. But it's the principle, and I don't pay DRE. I don't pay charges anymore because I'm working. I don't claim benefits. So for me, it's not a DRE issue. It's the principle of the thing. If the NHS gives you a piece of equipment, it's needed to keep you alive. In my case, to keep me breathing at night. It's obviously a health cost. It's not a social care cost. But I got this this leaflet back in October last year, and it explains that it's my responsibility to make sure I have battery backup. It's not the responsibility of the energy network, which you think it would be if they're going to cut the power off. It's not the responsibility of the NHS, although they seem to indicate it is. It's the principle of the thing here. I'm involved with another group where we're talking about this with the providers, but they didn't seem to realise that this is an issue that involves health versus social care expenditure. It involves reasonable adjustments. Who is responsible for making reasonable adjustments? It certainly shouldn't be disabled people who are using the equipment.
Does anyone would like to comment on that? I mean, it's probably outside the scope of this chat, I suppose, although I completely agree with you, Vicky.
Yeah, not so much comment, but to give an example, I don't know whether it applies in your case, but I have known some people who've got personal health budgets and backup generators have been agreed to come out of that, and it's been built into the support plan. So I don't know whether that is, if you've got any sort of health funding at all, whether there's an argument for that.
No, I've applied for a personal health budget. That was one of the first things I did when I got this medical equipment. I was told I've got to use it or you're at risk of dying at night. So clear medical need as far as I was concerned. But no, I don't qualify for a personal health budget because I can feed myself. That's what I was told.
Hello,
so
my name's Ali. Can I interrupt? I'm so sorry. I heard that if you contact your electricity supplier, ours is Western Power, for instance, they can provide you with the backup generator as soon as there's ever a power cut. So maybe it's something you have to talk to them. The NHS is notorious for refusing all help. They're like one of those bad insurance companies that you pay for your insurance, but suddenly when there's a need, they won't pay out. The electricity companies are supposed to send somebody with backup generators to your house if ever there's a power cut. So whether it's something that you could mark yourself as in need, and then once you've got that through the electricity company, you can go back to the NHS and say, this is what we have. It's sort of like another piece of paper of evidence.
No, unfortunately, this message I got specifically says that Scottish Power Networks cannot provide a battery backup for this equipment. Also, you have to make provision for at least 3 hours of being cut off. Potentially, I could die within 10 minutes. So having to wait 3 hours is not sufficient either.
Wow. I just thought really if you could have the evidence that you've already contacted the power companies first, go back to the NHS and say, I need to have this at all times. And though we have the backup support by the electric company, it does take this 3 hours. So then you have a reason for them to do, because they just, I think the other chap said it about the fish tank. If you don't have your official reason, then you won't get the support that you need. So what I'm saying is if you can get the reason from the power company who would accept that you are in danger and that the supply to your home should never be cut off, but should it ever be, you would need a backup generator. That's like an evidential letter that you can then show the NHS. And although they know, they say they're not responsible, in the end, they should be responsible because you're using their equipment. It's kind of, it's a lot of work, and everything that we do, it's always about the extra work over and above everything that we do. But if you don't have evidence, they don't give you it, do they? So I'm just thinking it's kind of, it's a ridiculous ask for anybody who's vulnerable. And I couldn't agree more. And I think it's terrible that anyone has to go through this. But it might be that that could be the piece of paper that gets you through the NHS, because they always look for evidence rather than you just saying, well, I need this or I'll die. They can refuse on that basis. But just
as I
having
say, I have applied for personal health budget for precisely that reason.
Yeah.
Oh, lovely. Thank you so much. If anyone else has any thoughts on this topic, please pop it in the chat. And we need to get on to the next questions. So Mark has asked, does anyone have experience of asking for their care charges to be reviewed in light of the increased utility costs? I think this one has Don's name written all over it.
Yeah, the way they calculate say you think your utilities costs have increased, and so your heating costs will increase, but they do still calculate how much DRE you get in the same way. And also they will often look at how much you're paying previously. So if you've got a standing order of a certain amount, they won't actually use that standing order. They will use how much you actually paid often the previous year. Because obviously everyone's bills increased and my standing order increased, and I asked for it to be reviewed and increased. And it's, well, a standing order is just a rough guess at how much you might pay. So what we will look at is how much you paid the previous year. And so what I've done now, the whole year is passed now. So I've written back to them saying, look, this is what the standing order is, what I actually paid, because I had meter readings and they were accurate. And so please backdate it the previous year to my standing order amount rather than the previous year's amount. But it is very hard. You got to actually, write to them and explain that it's increased. But when they calculate your DRE for household fuel, they don't always do it on a personal basis. They have a table of figures which is, made up and 20 years old, and there's no way you could actually challenge them. And so, you really need to just write to them and explain, but they'll probably say no, unfortunately.
Brilliant, thank you for that. Jenny has asked, saying her council is not very accurate on the DRE they accept. They don't have a list. I would say, Jenny, to put in a freedom of information request, and also to use the guides that have been mentioned, such as John's calculator. And then the next question, just to do a quick fire so I can try and get through everyone. Can councils add a percentage buffer on top of the MIG For example, adding a further 10% to the minimum income guarantee to enable people to have a little more income. Yes, they can. That is absolutely their choice. Some councils have done that. Some councils haven't even spoken about it or had any discussions openly about it. So yes, it is absolutely a choice that they can do that. Paul, is the need of evidence for DRE universal, or does it depend from council to council? So John has already answered this in the chat, saying it does vary from council to council, and he has provided a template letter. And what happens if you get your contributions lowered, but your local authority refuses to make up the difference? Would anyone like to take that one?
Yep, I can take that. Again, it's a legal requirement. So if you're, what local authority should do, regardless of your contribution, is pay the gross amount anyway. So that they can't say, oh, suddenly the costs have gone up because your charge amount has gone down. They're legally obliged to meet that assessed need. So if they don't do that, again, I know it's arduous. I know people are sort of downtrodden, but you really need to make a formal complaint and they'll roll over pretty quickly.
Right, thank you. Right, Lucy says not DRE related, but I've gone up to the top as my needs aren't being met. I've been told to get legal advice. Should I go to an ombudsman instead? Go to the ombudsman instead, sorry. Anyone want to take this one?
In order to go to the ombudsman, you must legally exhaust the complaints process first. So go through the complaints process, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and only when you've exhausted that are you legally allowed to go to the ombudsman. Remember, ombudsman decisions in England regarding lots of things like DRE and all that sort of thing are publicly available. Sadly, in Wales, they're not.
Right.
Sorry, can I just ask, what was stage 3? Because I've been told you've gone as high as you can get. I've had Birmingham, the head of Birmingham Social Services, say, no, we've offered you what we're offering you. That's it. You know, go away.
So ultimately, as far as the complaints process is concerned, then although there are national guidelines, it depends on local authority and individual policies. Ask them for a copy of that complaints process, and then once you've got to the top level, if they're still saying no, then you can write to the ombudsman.
Yeah, normally what they ought to do is let you know you've reached the end of their complaints process and then guide you towards going towards the ombudsman. And there should be a letter saying that. You need to have it in black and white because the ombudsman will ask for proof of that.
No, I haven't had anything. I've just had my social worker come out 3 times, say, we've offered you what we've offered you. We're not going anywhere. The head of social services has said this is all I'm told to give you.
I think what, as Brett said, if you need to complain formally in writing and you need to get responses in writing, and once you've gone through the whole process in writing, they should let you know you've gone through the whole process in writing and then direct you to the ombudsman if you want to take it further. If it's just conversations or on the phone, that won't count.
No, all in writing, and they've said, we've received your complaint, we're dealing with it, and then they dealt with it by saying, we've dealt with your complaint by sending a social worker out, we've sent the social worker out, and we've offered you this. And then it just went nowhere, to the point where they're now refusing to sign off my support plan.
Then you're now free to go to the ombudsman, because if you've documented every stage and you've said this is formal complaint stage 1 or whatever, and all the stages have been met, right to the ombudsman.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. There are so many more questions in the chat. And also, I do see that there were people with their hands up, but because there were so many questions in the chat, I wanted to really get through those as much as we could. But don't worry, we're not ignoring you. At the end, we've got a question and answer session, so please save it for that section. And then if we still haven't been able to get to you, then you can email us and we will still do our best to get back to you. I'm just so sorry, time has just gone so quickly. So we're going to now move on, but we will try and cover the other questions as much as we can as soon as possible. So, okay, so we've got the end of the poll results. So 87% of people feel that social care charges should be scrapped. And I do realise someone said this was a complicated question, and yes, it is. I mean, there can be more to it. But just on an overall, that's quite a very strong result there. So thank you so much for everyone who took part. We're now going to pass across to Jon, and you'll have the chance to ask him questions as well. And then we will take those questions where people had their hands up as soon as we can after that. Thank you so much, Jon. We'll pass across to you now.
Jade, were we going to have a quick comfort break in between? 5 minutes?
Oh, yes, sorry. Yes, we will take a 5-minute break now. Yes, sorry, I'm all over the place today. So what time is it? We'll be back at about past. So I know it's or 20, where are we? Around 25 past. I know it's just time to go and grab a drink, stretch your legs if you can, or if you're like me and can't, do a wiggle in your chair. But we will be back as soon as possible. Hi everyone, just giving everyone time to come back before we carry on. Just to cover, there's been requests in the event that some people are struggling to get some of the information off the chat. And so we have suggested that we upload it on our website afterwards. Could you please email me, and I will put my email in the chat if you want your name removed from that. It's just for accessibility reasons that people, need to see the chat. Also, I'm really sorry if Spotlight hasn't been working great for some people. We do understand some of you are lip reading, and we are absolutely trying our best to make sure the person is being shown, but it's not particularly being very helpful with us today. So I am really sorry if it's not working for anyone, and we will try and see if we can do anything different next time, or if that is just the restrictions of Zoom. But yeah, we're still quite new at this, as you can probably tell. So we will bear with us.
Hi Jade, it's Barbara here. Sorry I'm late.
Hello.
You're doing great. So
Thank you.
Enjoy.
Thank you. I sent out an email yesterday, or whenever I sent the link, and I did put some helpful links in there. So I put our website, which is where the recording of this will go. I put the link to Inclusion London's toolkit, DRE calculator, and that's got all the letters that Jon has been talking about and will be covering now. So, and I will also put them in the chat for you for anyone who didn't see that. Right, are we ready to pass to Jon now? Is everyone back and got your drinks? So thank you. So I'd like to introduce Jon Abrams from Inclusion London, who's going to be talking about DRE with us now. Thank you, Jon.
Thank you, Jade, and good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for inviting me to speak. It's a real pleasure to be here today. I'm the Campaigns and Justice Coordinator at Inclusion London. I've been working for deaf and disabled people's organisations for about 20 years now, including a lot of work in the social care field, including working with councils and also campaigning against them. Inclusion London is an organisation run and managed by deaf and disabled people, and we're a leading voice in London. We've built a national reputation for effective policy and campaign work. And a big part of our work is providing organisational support to other disabled people's organisations, across London. Including advocating for the rights of deaf and disabled people, providing training and support. And we probably support about 70 organisations, which represents about 80,000 disabled Londoners. I thought I'd concentrate more on the digital tool rather than the campaigns that we're running. I did post the link with one of our national campaigns, which you can all get involved in, and that's writing a letter to your MP. Just to let you know, colleagues are lobbying different political parties with the elections coming up, and it's only the Green Party that so far is committed to free social care. But members of our team are in contact with senior figures in the shadow cabinet, and we also meet with government ministers, and so we are pushing that at a national level. We also run several local campaigns in London with grassroots disabled campaigners looking to scrap care charges. So about a year ago, we were given funding by the Mayor of London to create a digital tool. And I'm just going to, let me see, I'm just sorry. Just checking before I share the screen, I haven't got the football on. What else is on here? Hold on. And I have put the link in the chat box. So I'll just share screen. So the idea behind it is a digital tool to support people to reduce their care charges. And it's been designed by disabled people, carers, and older people who have experience of the social care system. So in effect, we put all this knowledge and wisdom, or we've tried to, into this chatbot with the aim of getting your care charges down to zero. And we recognize, I don't do casework nowadays, but we recognize that online tools aren't accessible to a lot of people. And that's why we want to go out to organizations across the country, well, actually do it on Zoom, to show people how to use this so that they perhaps can support other people to put in claims. And as we all know, there are limitations around accessibility on the internet. And I've done a lot of campaigning against councils who want to put everything online. So we've also produced separately an online guide to claiming DRE, which complements the bot. It explains what DRE is, it explains the calculation and gives some top tips. As people have mentioned, the key thing when thinking about DRE is that councils often won't give you the different reasons. So we help to do this. And the other big thing is you've always got to give a reason. So saying that I need as someone mentioned earlier, I need a power generator is not enough. You need to say, I need a power generator because of my impairment means if the electricity is cut off, even for a short amount of time, my life or health is at risk. So you've always got to be able to give that reason. For example, I want an Apple Mac. What you can say is, I want an Apple Mac because it provides more accessible ways of interacting on the internet and which other computers don't provide, and their support services are more accessible. By the way, I'm making that stuff up about Apple. It's just, you've got, as long as you come up with a valid reason. So it's a simple process of registering. And the reason for registering is twofold, is that what I'll do is actually, what I should do is share with you what the end process is, sample letter. So once you've completed, oops, I've got so many screens open. Hold on. Stop share. Let's try again. I'm just closing some of my screens. Okay, hopefully. Let's see. Just looking for people who know me from I've won quite a few of these online workshops. The people who remember Blue Peter, there's a sample letter, here it is, that I've created. Here we go. So when you've gone through the process of the chatbot, it will send you this personalized letter. And as some colleagues have quite rightly pointed out, the head of our team is a disability lawyer who has extensive experience of social care, the Care Act, the Equality Act, has been involved in judicial reviews, court cases, So these letters have been put together quoting relevant bits of the Care Act. So the first bit is quoting the relevant part of this care and statutory guidance. And what it will then do is it will have dropped in all the expenses you're looking to claim and giving a weekly amount and plus the reason that you've given. So in this sample letter, the person is, so help in the home. I have difficulty remembering to carry out gardening tasks. I'm claiming for gardening, and that comes to £6.23 a week. And it could be other reasons that spring to mind, that I'm not mobile, I can't move my arms, or I have a learning difficulty or disability, and it's dangerous for me to work with sharp tools. Or an example, claiming internet and broadband, to keep in contact with friends and family to reduce social isolation, anxiety, and depression. So this puts it all in a letter that you're then in a position to edit and send off to your council. So I am going through this very quickly, but if you contact me, I'm more than happy to come to your groups online and run a session, because it's great for us as well. This is a new tool. So we're always looking for feedback and to improve it. And I've had some wonderful feedback from people. And one of the things reading the chatbot is we could develop a template letter for councils who push back about, well, you need to get that on the NHS. That's not true. If you give a valid reason why the NHS can't supply something, that's DRE. So, yeah, so it asks some screening questions. Unfortunately, this only works for England. The reason is there's different charging, as was explained at the beginning, in Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales, and they have different rules. So we just have a few screening questions. You can still say yes to them all. It says, are your savings less than 23,000 and are you claiming? And if you said no to any of them, it'll probably say you may not qualify to claim DRE. And this is the next bit. It's very simple to set up an account. There's a privacy statement saying the information is processed and held by Inclusion London. We need that information for two reasons. Is because we create a password for you, so you can come back in a day, a week, or a year later and carry on with your form just by entering a password. And if you say no, then again, it won't let you set up an account. And then it's very simple. John. Yes. This is just optional about local authority. It gives us information about now I've used this so many times that I use it so much to test, and I've got so many different. This is just because it knows me so well. So it already knows me, so I just need to give the password it sent me. Yes, I'm ready. And here's the password. This is an example if you came back later. And what it's done, as you'll see, I don't want to hear the basics again. And it will give me a summary of something that I worked on in earlier the week. It gives a running total. So your claim is currently £34 a week. One of the reasons is that if your charges are £50 a week, once you hit around £50, you don't need to carry on doing it. And when you first use it, this is what will happen is you'll get a menu of items, and as in our DRE guide it explains that, and as I've tried to explain, the list is kind of, it can be anything. So we've also set this up so you can use it on a mobile phone, and we decided it wouldn't be helpful if on the screen you had a list of like 100 options. So we've tried to categorize it. So help in the home, and it will then come up. Oops. Sorry, I was so quick pressing on buttons. Yes. Yes. Yep. No. Just put in my email again. It's my password. It's signed in. No. It's going to come back with the summary. I want to add more. So help in the home. It comes up with ideas. There's a thing to add anything else. And again, we've limited it, even though because otherwise the list could just be huge. So help with cleaning. You press yes. It's a regular expense because I'm paying weekly. Help with cleaning, you press that. And this is the key bit. It gives you some tips to help you think about the reason. Now, we're not using artificial intelligence, so the reasons are general. Hopefully in the next year or two, if we get more funding, we can personalize it more to people's individual circumstances. So again, this is just giving some tips that you maybe have tremors or weaknesses in your hand, or you may find it difficult to reach certain areas of your home, or you have a vision impairment. And for example, like I said, I haven't included anything, but it could be that you have a learning disability and you don't remember to do daily tasks. And so you need a cleaner to keep the home clean. So it's always thinking about those disability related reasons. So I can just put in, I can type in or just copy and paste it. I pay that weekly, £12 a week, and it gives a summary of the reason, the amount, and the expense. And I press, if I think there's an error, I can redo it. I'll press yes. That's all saved, okay. And you'll see my running totals gone up. I can then add something else. I'll just show you one more. Like a big one is around transport. So for example, a lot of people don't realize you can claim fuel for Motability car. We need to do quite a bit more work on the transport side to make it clearer. But it takes into account and it does all the calculations for you, whether you have standard, high rate or a Motability car, and you don't have to think about working out the difference between your allowance and what you're allowed to claim. So for example, if your mobility component was £50 a week and you were putting in for £40 a week of taxi fares, you wouldn't get. But if you put in for £60, you would get £10 a week. And then at the end of the process, all done, you can either log off, come back later. As you can see, it will come back to that list, or it then gives you the option to send that letter that I showed you at the beginning. And if Jade doesn't mind, just like 2 minutes to finish off.
Yeah, no worries.
Thank you, Jade. Let me just find. Scrap care charges. stop share. Start share. Just got to find where that is. Ah, there it is. So in your welcome email, if you sign up to use the chatbot, you'll get a link to this, and it goes into a bit more detail, explains what DRE is. It talks about how the tool works, top tips, and I've given some examples. As we said, always giving a reason. So incontinence pads, I know that came up in the chat thing, that our bot does remind you that for certain things, it does put in a reminder that you have to give a reason why you weren't able to purchase it on the why the NHS couldn't supply it. So in this instance, it's because Jeremy is allergic to the ones, but it could be because they're not the right size, or it could be they've run out. Or with a wheelchair, it could be because you need a specially one design that the NHS doesn't supply. So in the chatbot, I didn't go through that. It does give reasons and prompts. Here, for those who are interested, it does give examples of how we calculate it. And in the letter, I didn't show you that bit at the end, it gives an appendix of all the calculations. We've also got a section on providing evidence. We say, send in whatever you have, but don't worry if you don't have everything. As a colleague mentioned earlier, in East Sussex, the Ombudsman said, it's very clear in the Care Act, you don't have to, you can't have a blanket policy of asking everyone to provide receipts. So if you have an adaptation that costs £10,000 to your home, fair enough, you can expect the council want to see some evidence. But if it's £3 going to the cinema, well, it's not that cheap, but these smaller receipts. We've also started to put together some template letters to address that, which you can also download here. And we'll set them up on the chatbot over the next few months. But when you use the chat box, you have the link to these template letters as well. So the one about asking for more evidence and receipts, we quote the relevant Ombudsman decision. The one about when councils have got very restrictive lists, if they start refusing some of your claims, again, we just seeing if I can. Yeah, one of the things it's Svetlana, who's a disability lawyer, came up with in our letter for receipts. Obviously, it won't apply to everyone. So we do make it quite clear, delete this passage. Under the Equality Act, it may be, it's like we say, we ask the council, under the Equality Act, because of my impairment, I can't collect and record receipts as you're asking, how you can make a reasonable adjustment. So we put that in as well. But obviously that is very specific, and we do highlight it to take it out, because some of us, for example, are quite capable of recording and holding on to our receipts, but that's another thing to push back with the council with. So yeah, I can stop there.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much, John. That was absolutely fantastic and so helpful. I'm just wondering, with the rest of the time we've got left, is whether it could be good for Don to do his talk now, and then the rest of the time left can then go to questions with everyone, to whoever. You can direct them to people, or it can just be a general question, rather than have questions, then another speaker questions again. I just thought it might flow better. So if it's okay to pass to Don now, he is going to speak to us about the NAFIO guide. Is that the right pronunciation?
Yeah, I'll be very brief, because I can put most of it in the chat. But essentially, when you have your assessment for DRE, the finance assessment officers use a guide. Let's say you want to claim for extra laundry, it might cost you £10 a week. In their guide, it might just say £3.50 a week. So essentially, they have the guide is a blanket policy, and you're meant to be assessed personally. So if it costs you an extra £7 a week, they should give you £7 a week. Not just look at the guide and say, well, in the guide, it only says £3.50. And the worst thing is, I mentioned before, is about the heating. You know, your heating bill, I know for many people's gone up substantially, but the way they work it out, it's not based on your personal bill, it's based on some formula that they've calculated. That formula uses outdated figures from a table, and the table is updated, but the whole process is not transparent. No one's sure how they calculated the figures, and the figures aren't part of the CARE Act. And the NAFO, who are the National Association of Financial Assessment Officers, are not part of the government. They're not part of the CARE Act either. They're just a body that governs financial assessment officers, and they put forward what they think ought to be the right amount for these DRE items. So what I'm trying to do is get local authorities to stop using this guide. So we're trying to bring a case, and we're looking for more people to sort of join the case. I mean, ideally what we're going to do is raise money via crowd justice. And so anyone involved in the case wouldn't have to pay any legal fees. And we have an NGO who's going to help us raise the money, and also that they know a law firm who will willingly do the case. But I'll put the information in the chat. So if you're interested in knowing more about this or joining the case, we do have a meeting on Monday the 22nd at 2 p.m. But I'll put all that in the chat, and just email me if you want to know more. So I'll put it in the chat and hand back to Jade now. Thanks very much, Jade.
Oh, thank you so much, both of you. That was both for such helpful information. Right, I'm not sure which way round to do this. We've got about 5 questions in the chat that we didn't cover, but I'm also conscious there were people with their hand up. I know Russell had his hand up. Would you still like to speak, Russell, or have we?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, you can.
I want to make an inquiry about running costs for a vehicle, specialized vehicle. My wife's disabled, and we run a vehicle just for her purpose of transportation. Transportation is important. She has to go to hospital, doctors, hydrotherapy a long way away. So she gets good use out of the vehicle. The council has deducted the mobility allowance from their calculation. So in effect, that's not taken into account. So it might be the other way around. But the actual costs are considerably higher than the mobility amount. Would they have to look at this, or can they just dismiss it and say that mobility is the amount that's assigned for this purpose?
No, I can take that, Jade, if you want to.
Yes, please.
But essentially, any cost that's over and above the mobility allowance, I mean, some of any cost that's over that, they ought to consider. So if you get the high rate of mobility and it's say £70 a week, anything more than that, they have to consider. If you do a search of the guidance, the CARE Act guidance, there are paragraphs about that in the guidance, but essentially any transport costs or mobility costs above the actual mobility allowance that they should take into consideration. And often what they might say is, oh, it's only for essential journeys. It's not essential journeys. It's for anything to do with transport cost, and it could be anything to do with visit family and friends. Again, that's in the CARE Act guidance. It's so you don't suffer social isolation, and so you can keep up with your appointments and everything else. So anything above the mobility allowance should be taken into account.
And that might include the depreciation on the vehicle as well as the actual running costs?
I'm not sure about depreciation, but let's say the fuel cost, and if it's your own vehicle and you're paying, I don't know, tires more frequently or something, anything to do with that as a transport cost. But I'm not sure about the depreciation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone who would like to ask a question directly now? Either wave with your video on or put your hands up. I'm just trying to go through. Anthony, would you like to speak?
Hi, yes, I wonder if I can. My daughter's in supported housing. She's got special needs, learning difficulties. She does work. We've never claimed DRE. She does get direct payments, and I'm currently fighting the council for her council tax, etc. But she does still pay quite a bit. Is it worth her trying for DRE, seeing that she works?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay then, pretty simple. And can you get it retrospectively?
I think that depends on the argument. And
Yes,
the
is the
council.
short answer. Yes, you can. If you can show evidence that you've had that cost and that they've failed to take it into account, you know, they can say no, but ultimately, if you use the complaints process again and say I've had that cost, but your guides or your assessment failed to take that into account, then I'm sure the ombudsman would ultimately have a view. The least they can say is no, but you know, I mean, ultimately, I'd say give anything a go.
Well, absolutely. You're always hitting your head against the wall until the wall falls down, aren't you?
Exactly.
So that includes like supported housing. She's now got broadband. She's just bought a phone so we can keep in touch. She's got an iPad, etc. And the list goes on. She's paid for it because she works. But now we're getting a little bit short on pennies, or she is, because we keep it in her name.
Sure.
But that's excellent news. Thank you very much. I'll take that forward and I'll.
And just briefly to come back on the depreciation issue, then yes, it's a disability related cost if you can demonstrate that within a period of time that vehicle will need to be replaced. So, you know, you'll have a hard battle on your hands, but yes, they should allow it.
Thank you. I just want to cover something on disability related expenditure again, as it's come up on the chat a couple of times, perhaps a slight misunderstanding of what it is. It isn't a payment to you. One of the questions was, why do we have to pay first in order to claim it back, as we don't always have the money to do so? Unfortunately, that is how it works. It's not a payment, as I said, it is money off your care contribution. So you have to show that you've made that payment to whatever it is in order to get that taken off your care contribution. So if you have a zero contribution, you don't need to worry about DRE unless, you know, they put a contribution on at this point. And if your DRE goes over and above your contribution, they're not going to pay you the difference. It is literally hopefully to get it down to as low as possible, or ideally to zero, but that is what it is for. So I just wanted to cover that, as that was coming up as a bit of confusion. Again, there's questions about the chat. So just to cover that again, we will be putting it on the website. If you do not want your name on it, please email me, which I've put my email in the chat, and we'll remove your name. But otherwise, it's just to help people who've missed questions, or it's just so much information in there. Right, would anyone else like to ask a question? If you want to wave or put your hand up, I'll go through, see if I can see anyone.
Jade,
Wendy?
Yeah. So I just wanted to, and I think I'm right, but I just wanted to make sure. So one of the things, so sometimes people might not be using all of their services that they have been assessed for. So am I right that if your services that you're being charged for cost less than what your contribution was worked out at, you don't have to pay your full contribution? Does that make sense? Sorry.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Because I think through the pandemic, a lot of people were still paying their full contribution when they weren't getting much of a service or any service. So can they go back and, because if the local authority is clawing back money, can the disabled person say, well, hang on a minute, some of that money was my contribution that never got used, so should they be getting money back as well?
Yeah, there was actually, this came up in the group recently, that exact scenario had happened. They were clawing back about £10,000, I think it was, and originally told her, tough luck, we're taking it all, even though a good portion of that was her contribution. She put a complaint in and they backed down. So Brett, if you want to add any more to that, but definitely fight that if that's going to be the case.
Absolutely, because you know, ultimately you are challenging a local authority, and even if they say no, that doesn't mean they're right.
Yeah. Very true. On all counts.
That's a really good point. And I suppose my worry is that sometimes there's a lot of people, you know, that are stressed and worn down and absolutely shattered, and perhaps don't have the capacity at that point to sort of bang their fist a bit. And that's the people that worry me, because I think you know, some people will just say, okay, the local authority said no, okay, I won't push it. So yeah, it's good that you're getting out there so that we can help people to challenge things.
And for the benefit of the people in Wales, not only have we got our MPs, but we've got our assembly members as well. So tackle them. Believe you me, they don't like them.
In regards to what you just said, Wendy, about people unable to fight back, I mean, I completely agree. That is unfortunately the crux of the whole system, that we shouldn't have to make everything a battle, but unfortunately we do. And I'm right there right now, as I said earlier, so I completely empathise with everyone else in that situation. And I wish we could say, you know, make it another way. And that is why we try and fight on a group national level, or in, you know, with all the countries, because it shouldn't always be down to individuals having to constantly fight back. But sadly, that is where we're at the moment. But we do understand it's rubbish and it shouldn't be that way. I wish I could say something better there. But Philip, would you like to come in?
Yes. Is there any pressure that our insurer, Mark Bates, could put on the government or the NHS or anybody else? Because it strikes me, particularly with the issue I raised about the battery backups, that there could be insured event implications if you don't have the right battery. There are lots of different types of battery. If it's up to you to buy your own, you might buy the wrong one. That has a fire risk to our PAs. So if there's any pressure that our insurer can put on government at a national level, that would be helpful as well, I think.
David, would you like to take that one?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Philip. It's an interesting idea. I think the best thing to do, I think absolutely, I could take that back. So if you're able to email me, perhaps what I'll do is drop you an email. I'll drop you a message in the chat with my email address, and it's something we can pursue. But I think it's all angles, isn't it? If we can have any impact at all, or MBL can, I should say, I can forward that over.
Lovely, thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to say anything? Just going through now. Sometimes it's hard to spot everyone. Hang on.
Rachel's got a hand up. Rachel.
Oh, lovely, Rachel. Should we go to you?
I have put it in the chat. My daughter lives with me, and for the last 4 years we've had the adult social care package. But this year we're being charged for respite, and we've never been charged for respite now before.
Okay, I want to come in there just to say that if a local authority is changing its policy, whether that's disability related expenditure, whether it's direct payments or whatever, they are legally obliged to publicly consult before they do it. They can't just sit in a meeting and say, oh, we're going to do this. They have to publicly consult. So as part of your formal complaint, then you say, can you please provide me with evidence of exactly when and how you have publicly consulted? And that public consultation must be meaningful. It's not just meeting one service user in a room, 3 weeks every Wednesday or whatever it might be. It needs to reach representative groups.
And also what they ought to be doing when they change policy is doing an EIA, Equality Impact Assessment.
Yep.
As far as I'm aware, we've had no assessments. I've had no social worker since February, which I'm chasing up as urgent, because their costings have gone from a small amount to quite substantial amounts now. So I think I am going to be doing a DRE with the council, but ultimately I need a social worker on board as well.
Lovely, thank you.
Hello, I don't know if you can hear me. I'm just wondering, who are these people that they're supposed to have consulted with? Because my council have just amended their policy, and they say they've given me transitional protection till the end of the year, And from then, my contribution will go from £27 per week to £146 per week. And they did the equality assessment. They identified that by the change of policy, 192 people will be affected, but 84 people will be worse off. And they feel by offering the transitional protection for 12 months and 12 months only, that mitigates their decision and makes it fair. So who are these people that they're supposed to have consulted with?
Can I just check the beginning of your question? Sorry, the sound wasn't great there. Were you asking who are they meant to consult with before they make a decision?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because they say they come to the decision after a consultation.
Right.
And that the decision was, like I've just described, that because the equality assessment identified that 86 people receiving care would be affected by the policy change and would be worse off, by awarding a transitional protection period, which obviously is arbitrary because they've just put 12 months out of the air and decided, in their opinion, that that was enough for the likes of myself to adjust my finances so that I can go from £27 a week to £146 a week. So who would they have the consultation have taken place with, or who should they have legally consulted to have made that decision?
Right. First of all, they need to consult with any representative group. So in other words, anybody who is likely to be eligible for services, full stop, whether they get them or not. So going back to Don's point earlier, equality impact assessments are to see who it's likely to impact. But remember, even when they have made that decision and they say, oh, it only affects a small number of people or relatively small number of people, if you take a complaint to the highest level and then go to the ombudsman can then deem whether that assessment is fair and reasonable.
Yeah, I took it, I'm now at stage 2. It's been extremely stressful because they chose to deal with the DRE side separately. So they wanted me to do 2 appeals, one for the transitional protection and a separate appeal, rather than doing it as one complete complaint. So they've deliberately gone out the way to make the process even more difficult and even more stressful.
As I always say, if you've exhausted the complaints procedure, then ultimately the ombudsman's the way forwards. Or ultimately, if you can get an organisation behind you that will back you, then if you were to take them to judicial review on a point of law, that would then be looked at.
Yeah, I do intend going to the ombudsman. I've got the fight in me, but yeah, it's hard work.
Yeah, I appreciate how hard it is for everybody. I really do.
Thank you very much.
Right, was anyone else got a question they'd like to ask? I'm just looking now. Can't see any hands. Does anyone want to speak that I'm not seeing at all? No? Okay, well, put your hand up if you change your mind. But in the meantime, we've got some of the questions from earlier that we didn't get to in the chat. So if any of our panel want to answer these, please do let me know. So Amelia doesn't use heating or hot water to save costs so that she can pay for things that help with her well-being. This is something her council won't acknowledge. How does she get this recognised in her DRE?
Again, it's through the complaints process, because you need to challenge the local authority in its policy and say, actually, because you're not recognising that policy or that DRE, that's unlawful.
Great, thank you. Don, did you have anything to add there?
Yeah, also, exactly. And also give the reasons. So, for example, perhaps your body temperature is lower because of your impairment, and so you need to keep the heat on all day. Perhaps you have a health condition such as Parkinson's, which means you're very rigid and then you don't generate heat. And so even through the summer, you may have to have the heat on more. Or perhaps because you're housebound, because of your impairment, which means you spend more time at home than non-disabled people. You've got no choice. And then obviously your electric and heat is going to be on. But the interesting thing is, and I don't know if one of my colleagues can address this, is obviously in this instance, they're so worried that that they're not going to have the receipts or evidence to make the claim because they're not using the electricity. So perhaps someone...
Sorry, it's a very good point, John. Yeah, it's catch-22. People are so scared of the bills that they don't put it on, and that really affects their health. So in a way, you kind of need to put it on and then try and claim it back. But I realize by doing that, you might put yourself in financial poverty. But it's very, very stressful. And the thing is, they only pay you in arrears as well. They won't pay you up front. So, but you kind of need to have evidence. And maybe try it for a quarter and then try and claim it and then just show them the bill. But the problem is, you're saving money, but also you're not getting the evidence to show how much it's really costing you.
Sorry, can I just come in on that? Because my energy company, I think it's E.ON, they actually send me an email every month saying what my direct debit is. But I also have a Nest thermostat, and that actually says how many kilowatts of energy I've used. So if I don't put it on, every month I get an email that says, this is your usage, this is what you've had, check it against your... I mean, I paid for... I obviously paid for the Nest thermostat, but that's in my records as well. So if I ever needed evidence as to how much I'm using, there was, I'm trying to remember the scheme, but the scheme over England for everybody having a smart meter. So even if you don't have it on, if you've got a smart meter, your smart meter should be recording the fact that there's no energy being used or less energy being used, or, you know, like in December you used X amount and now we're in May and you haven't used it since February. So there should be a way of somebody recording how much you're using because people are charging you for it.
Yeah, I definitely think they can be really useful tools when it comes to proving, you know, what you're paying, definitely. Thank you. Got one potentially for Don here. This is from Wendy. How do you get your council to raise their DRE across the board rather than individually? i.e. the rate of washing has been the same for years at 80p a load. The council just keeps saying families need to be reassessed individually, but that she wants the whole lot reviewed to bring it into line with reality, to be frank. Have you got any ideas for her?
You mean for everyone in the county, or?
Yeah, so an entire county. I suppose their guide is out of date. Or what they
yeah, I mean, the guide's very out of date. I mean, I think it's a lot more than that, but essentially it needs to be down to a personal assessment. So if you can show how much you use and show your bills. I mean, I know Iggy, who couldn't be here today, he did say that there's a bit of equipment you can buy which tells you how much electricity an appliance is using. And if you know how much you're paying per kilowatt on your bill, then you can work out exactly how much that appliance is actually using. It's also not just the electricity for extra laundry. Don't forget, it's the extra soap powder as well. So all those things need to be included. But you have to have receipts. Well, ideally have receipts, but also DRE is not an exact science. I think you have to sort of say, look, this is what I think it is. It'd be very unreasonable for them to say, you know, we need to know exactly to the kilowatt. Yeah, I think you need to put it forward to them and say, this is what I believe it is.
Yeah.
Although it can be done on an individual basis, as we've talked about, in order to change a council's policy across the board to look at all DRE issues, then you're talking about disability organisations getting together, disabled persons groups. I know John's got his hand up, so he might want to add something there.
Yeah, John.
Yeah, I was going to ask Don. So if you get that piece of equipment, you can claim that as DRE. So you could buy the equipment saying, well, you're asking me for this evidence. This piece of kit cost £80 and it gives you, because I also understand for a lot of people, it's not practical or reasonable to go out and buy these pieces of equipment and monitor it and work it all out. Yeah, on the question, that's a big part of my job is campaigning. Yeah, it's very hard to give an answer without kind of finding out particular circumstances in a particular part of the country. So as was mentioned earlier, Hammersmith and Fulham abolished care charges in 2015 and Tower Hamlets will in 2024. But it's to understand kind of the makeup of the local area, who's willing to campaign. Hammersmith and Fulham, for example, was always a swing seat. So it's obviously harder in certain parts of the country, for example, if there's a 90-seat majority for one of the main parties. But there are lots of things that you can do if you do get together as a group and you target cabinet meeting, council meetings, local health and wellbeing boards, writing to councillors. But yeah, if Jade wants to share my email address with everyone, I'm happy to give more information on what groups can do, because I work with groups in London doing that.
I think also the key thing is here, they shouldn't have a blanket policy. Rather than say that the local authority ought to put it up to a certain amount for everyone in the county, everyone should be assessed on their own personal needs. I did put some ombudsman cases in the chat, and that might provide some of the arguments for you. But if they say to you, "Oh, we only allow 80p per load," it's illegal for them to have a blanket policy. So they need to assess you individually based on your own personal circumstances.
Jade, is it all right if I come in quickly on that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Because my concern is that everybody knows that electricity's gone up. Everybody's electricity's gone up. Everybody's paying more for their washing powder and that. So I suppose my thing is, why should we have to get people to do it individually? Because actually it's bloody obvious, isn't it? You know, that we're all paying more. So I suppose my thing is, why can't the local authority go, do you know what, you're right. If it was 80p 10 years ago, it's probably £3.50 now. But it's just, I think it's that thing about putting the responsibility back on people who are already worn out and drained. And to me, it seems like the common sense thing is actually, yes, it has gone up for everybody. So let's recognise that. But I think we'll definitely be in touch with you, John and Don, though, through Jade, if that's all right.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, has anyone else got any more questions before I carry on with Alison? Would you like to go? You're muted, Alison. We can't hear you. We still can't hear you. No, not anyone else?
Hi, Jenny again. I read somewhere, didn't Disability Rights come up with how much it costs extra when you're disabled? Like something like 500 and something extra a month.
I know the Joseph Rowntree Foundation did, and it was for, I think it was a moderate to severe disability with mobility issues. It was about 1,500, I seem to recall. I'll double check that, but it was a lot higher than one thinks. And yeah, I think that is such an interesting quote to use, because, you know, they looked at so many different families to get that information. And so, yeah, it's a more realistic look, certainly, than perhaps what the government is using.
Yeah, carrying on from the person who made that last point of like it's bloody obvious. They've done the research, but they're not going to use that research, are they?
Vicky?
Yeah, it was just on the back of that. I think it was Scope that did it, and when they first did it, it was just over £500. They've recently published it, and it's just under £1,000 a month now.
Lovely. Anyone else want to, any last questions before we start wrapping up?
Yeah, may I think I've put my hand up.
Yeah.
I count myself as an informal carer for somebody, and he's at the fairly starting stage of this whole caring process. And the Care Act assessment has been undertaken, and actually it's going to be put in for sourcing tomorrow. And I feel quite strongly that the statement that says that I just provide him cash so that his carers can do the shopping is very undervaluing what I'm actually doing for him. And this week I asked him to sign a letter listing the kinds of things that I do for him and agreeing to pay £10 an hour for that, so that I can feel valued. And I just feel that from talking now and hearing you, I should send a letter to his social worker and say, you know, please, I want this included, because it's ridiculous to think that he can do all these things for himself. He just can't do it. He's got mental health issues and physical.
Can I just, I'll turn my video back on, sorry. Can I just come in there? One thing to say is that when you're in the midst of it, even though I am very aware of knowledge and processes and what can be done with the MPs, councillors, complaints process, etc. If you're in the thick of it and it's actually you that it's affecting, then you're not the best advocate for yourself because you don't want to admit it to yourself. So we need to get together as a group. We need to help each other in that if we've got these issues going on, having an outsider look at it who understands disability issues, whether it's a friend, whether it's a neighbor, whether it's one of us, if you take something away, you know, write stuff down, because ultimately when I was looking at dealing with these kind of social care issues for my dad, I was too emotionally involved to be clear-headed and focused on dealing with it. So give yourselves a pat on the back and just say, actually, I need some help with this. Reach out to people.
I want to say to Harriet, in terms of being assessed, I've just put
Don?
Yeah, Don, yeah. I've just put a link in the chat. Most local authorities, even though the Care Act's been here for about 9 years, they still assess you under the old way. They don't really give you a proper assessment under the Care Act. There's a link in the chat now to a self-assessment tool run by the Campaign for Real Care.
Wow.
And what that will do, it would guide you through doing your own self-assessment, but it would do it in line with the Care Act. So the 9 areas of well-being. And you can use that for the social worker to say, look, we've done a self-assessment, and they ought to take that into consideration, because under the Care Act, it does say that the service user best knows what their needs are.
Thank you very much. It may be too late to get it into this Care Act assessment, but I still feel I have to send something off today. Thank you.
You can always get it reviewed if it's not how you like, get it reviewed.
Yeah, and I have not been offered an assessment in the Care Act assessment for my friend. It just says advice and information for the carer.
Again, sorry, under the Care Act, the carer is allowed to have an assessment as well.
Yeah, but I call myself an informal carer.
Okay.
On that note of informal carer, because really you are a carer, and once you go into the bracket of using money as a payment, it's much more more official, and even though it might, like Brett said, might be hard sometimes, you need someone else maybe to look at it for you. And you can, like Brett has said before, keep going back until you get to the last bit, because you caring for someone else, because I've cared for my son, can be very draining, and you need a break. And you need to give yourself that break as well, and that will help with your relationship with the person you're caring for. So maybe I'm just trying to nudge you into getting the care, whatever carers charity you've got near you, to do an assessment. Do you have one of those?
Yeah, I've been in touch with the Carer Support Centre. Had a good telephone call for lasting about an hour, and I've been to one online support session so far. That's a start. Thank you.
They do also have an allowance and funding you can get through Carers Trust, so that you can get things for yourself that you might need as you're caring for someone else informally as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, everyone. It now come to the end of the meeting. That has been such a fantastic session with all the questions that have been asked. It just shows what need there is out there for things like this. And we hope that some of you were helped by the answers. First of all, I just want to say thank you so much to our speakers, Jon from Inclusion London and Don O'Neal, who spoke about his campaign, and information from both of those will be going on our website, so you can follow up on both of the topics discussed. And I also want to say a massive thank you to the panel, Ellen, Vicky, Brett, Don and Jon. So for your diaries, our next meeting is the 19th of September. So please pop it in your diaries. And also we will be sending out a feedback form relating to this session by email. So you'll be able to hopefully tell us what you thought. And we just want to say thank you. 2 hours is a long time to give up for you all to come, and we really do appreciate you all. And it's so amazing to see how many of you are still here at the end, because I know it's a lot of information, but thank you, honestly. So Lucy, did you have a question?
Sorry, Jade, I'm trying to save the chat. I know you said you put stuff at the weekend, but people have been trying to help me with solicitors and things. The dot that's normally there so I can save the chat is not on there. So I think you've disabled or not ticked the option to be able to save the chat. So is there any way of you saving it and emailing it out or putting it on the website?
Yeah, we've said we will put it on the website for everyone. I don't think we've done anything purposefully, but I know you can't copy and paste, which is really annoying when you want to get that bit of information. So yeah, we will make sure the information is available.
Thank you. There's normally 3 dots next to whoever you're typing to, and you can click on that and save the whole chat. It's not there, so I just wanted to make you aware. I'm not blaming anybody. It's been really useful, but I could do with the information. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much, everyone, as well, for your comments. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, well done, Jade. Amazingly chaired. Really well done.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have to say, honestly, this is the first one that I've been involved in, and it's been really, really informative.
Oh, I'm so glad. Thank you.
So incredibly professional, Jade. Well done.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it's hard to keep whatever 80 odd people in line.
You did well. You did well, darling.
Oh, thank you.
Right, I'm going to wrap it up now, Jade. I'm going to click on end. Is that okay? Are we ready to go?
Just quickly, Sandy, how do you get to know more? If you go on our website, and also I sent an email around with the link. I put our link to our Facebook page on there. So yes, Harriet, I know I speak too quickly. I'm sorry. I get nervous and babble, so I am sorry. But yes, otherwise, thank you, everyone.
No.